Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar presentation reviewing PEOs and whether or not it's time to look at separating from your PEO or not. This is being brought to you today by Johnson & Dugan, AEIS, and KBI Benefits, all Bay Area benefits consultants who are members of the California United Benefit Advisors, an independent benefits advisory association spread out across the country with over 160 independent advisory firms who are collectively collaborating and sharing best practices and processes and programs for the benefits community employers out there. Today we're going to be talking about, again, your PEOs. If you're in a PEO, who we assume most of you are in at this time with a PEO, and whether or not it's time to look at maybe separating from that PEO. Our presenter today is Joanne Vernon from PrimePay, a payroll, HR systems, and PEO kind of alternative provider that we teamed up with. And Joanne's going to speak to us today about how to kind of look at your PEO and judge whether or not it's time to look at looking at other alternatives and analyzing those. So we're all here to help you with that. And with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and turn over now to Joanne. Thank you, Joanne.
Thanks so much, Mike. Good morning, everyone. And yes, welcome to, Are My Needs Still Being Met? We're going to take a look at the PEO and ASO models. And first, just really like to thank our broker partners that are here with us today. Michael McQueenie from Johnson & Dugan, who we just heard from. We also have Chris Freitas from AEIS, as well as Alyssa Bland from KBI. So I would like to just thank you guys for putting this together and allowing PrimePay to be a part of it. My name is Joanne Vernon. I am the regional advisor, regional manager for compliance and benefit services for PrimePay in the West. I'm really pleased to be here today, and really what I'm hoping for is that we can begin a dialogue about looking at what are your needs as an employer, to begin that conversation and determine if your needs are still being met. As we go through the presentation today, think about what changes have occurred over the last maybe 5 years or 1 to 2 years, or perhaps even just recently within your own organization. Has your employee population grown? Has the demographics changed? What are the goals of the company for the next few years, and what is the strategic plan that you need to get to those goals? Perhaps growth has been the immediate focus, and now retention or recruitment of top talent is now becoming a top priority. Those are just a couple of things that I would like to just kind of start sparking that conversation with. But as we go through the presentation, you may come up with a few more that is more relevant to your needs. Now, just a little housekeeping, due to the nature of the webinar and the many people that we have on the line, we will keep the lines muted for the duration of the presentation. However, feel free to ask any questions that you might have through the question feature through the webinar tab page. Our goal is to be able to answer them all at the end. If time doesn't present itself that we can actually do that, we will make sure that we respond individually to each and every one. And we will also have available a copy of the slide presentation along with the recording so that you'll have those key pieces as well. So let's get started. So today we're going to take a look at a PEO, what is a professional employer organization, as well as look at the benefits of moving to an ASO option, or what we'll call an administrative services option. And once you've identified, or perhaps you're at the point now that you want to start looking at an ASO as an alternative, we'll discuss, where do you need to begin? We'll dive into the client services agreement through a PEO, and then how we can connect the solution together. What we can do to bring all that we've learned and all that we need together to make it one cohesive solution. So that's really kind of the goal of what we're going to do today. I always like to start with a quote, and this one resonates with me daily as I work with employers around the Western US. I'm just going to read the quote. Employers need a consultant committed to driving sustainable change and ensuring their benefit strategy is aligned with their business strategy. So what does this mean? Well, in our world is changing. It's ever changing, right? And keeping things in one bucket or keeping focused in one area is just no longer going to work. We need to be sure that we're aligning our benefit strategies, which I'm not going to take it away. It's a very huge part of a discussion, along with the business strategy so that all needs are being met for you, the employer. With an ever-increasing economy, it is also now about recruiting, right, and retaining top talent. And all of these areas play a direct role with the benefit strategy, or more importantly, right, with that business strategy. So we'll get started right into the PEO piece of it. Did you know that according to, and these statistics come from the National Association of PEOs, that the average PEO is about 19 employees. PEOs represent about 156,000 to 180,000 small to mid-sized clients. And when you think of a small or to mid-sized client, everyone really kind of has a different definition of what that means. But what we see when talking with clients, we see, maybe under 20 employees is really kind of considered a small employer. And then your mid-size employer starts at about that 50 employee size. And because the PEO becomes the employer of record, they employ about 2.7 to 3.4 million people. And just to give you an idea of what that means, there are about 780 to 980 PEOs nationally. So that's just to give you a few stats on PEOs. When you think about a PEO, I think that you need to understand the challenges and or risks, right, that are inherent with contracting with a PEO. So with a co-employment model, you need to understand who is responsible and who is at risk. Now, the Small Business Efficiency Act did clarify co-employment models, but there are still some inherent risks. And I think one of the biggest ones is that the employer still bears the legal and financial burden for mistakes made by a PEO. So I'm going to say that one more time. You as the employer still bear the legal and financial burden for mistakes that are made by a PEO. However, with that said, right, this issue was solved partially by an employer hiring an IRS certified PEO, and this was done through the Tax Increase Prevention Act of 2014, or sometimes you'll hear us call it TIPA. So a certified PEO and no other person is to be treated as the employer liable for employment taxes with respect to wages paid by that PEO to a worksite employee. So that's a lot of words right there, but specifically, the certified PEO is responsible for the filing and the reporting of the wages and taxes. So there's one of the risks right there that you need to make sure that you're considering. Another one is the limitation to the PEO's partnered carriers and benefit offerings. And recently, according to a recent MetLife study that was done in 2018, 60% of employees, they're looking for flexibility, choice, and non-traditional options, and they're actually willing to pay for that. And in 2017, that was at 52%, so that's up 8%. So just another thing to consider, you are limited to what the PEO puts together. Another one is the renewals are set to the PEO timeline, so that may not actually line up with you as the employer, what your business model or needs are. Future renewals, future renewals are only as good as the PEO's ability to accurately underwrite their book of business. So keep in mind when you think about that a PEO is in business on its own, right? So they need to be profitable as well. So just another thing to consider. Fees are also billed on gross payroll. Now, when I say that, that's an industry standard. There are different ways that PEOs do bill their fees, but in general, they're billed on gross payroll. So what does that do for the employer? It could actually eliminate that tax benefit, for using some of those Section 125 services like FSAs or POP plans. Some of those you may be familiar with. They could also be hard to exit, hard to get out of. Clients now have to find solutions, for multiple services, and they could be locked into a contract. So the need to understand that client services agreement, which we'll talk about more detail a little bit later, but understanding that piece of it is key and needs to be understood. And then you just have to think about the liability shift in regards to like high deductibles on their plan designs or hurdles to realize benefits. This could have an impact on the strategy of you as the employer or the culture that you have within what is driving your business. So because you're put, all into the one bucket with the PEO, is that still aligning with what is important to you as an employer? Okay, so I did talk about this a little bit. Actually, I think I actually said it twice a moment ago, but I just kind of want to talk a little bit more about this. I'm going to read it one more time. The employer still bears the legal and financial burden for the mistakes made by a vendor of a non-certified PEO. So earlier, I had mentioned that there's somewhere around 800 PEOs nationally, but did you know that less than 3% of those PEOs are actually certified? So that's something to really think about. If you're currently in a PEO model, is your PEO currently certified, and have you really been able to get what you need out of that PEO by contracting with them? So if you are with a non-certified PEO, regardless of the needs analysis and the reason why you move to a PEO, you need to really think about and talk about the legal and financial burden, because that could be substantial. So we've spent a little bit of time talking about PEOs, but our real focus here is let's turn to the ASO model. What is an ASO model? Well, unlike the PEO model, an ASO model allows you, the employer, to contract with services or options that are valuable to you as an employer. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. And with using the ASO model, you're still providing the regulatory and compliance components that are necessary and required to be an employer. So what are the keys to working with an ASO? Well, the key really is one size is not going to fit all. So it's going to allow you as the employer to hire or bring together the talent and partners, right, that fit your needs. And remember in the beginning that I talked about the business strategy of you, the employer. So bringing together that talent. For example, we have great talented folks right here on our line right now with Mike and Chris and Alyssa from our broker partners. So bringing that top talent is going to be key. It's also going to allow you to contract with only the vendor and services that are relevant to your demographics. You'll still realize the necessary HR, benefit, and payroll administrative solutions, along with the compliance and regulatory needs. But you only have to worry about what's valuable to your employer, so contract with only those services. Each employer is unique, and each business strategy for you as the employer is unique. So one size does not always fit all, and trying to conform to one offering or services really isn't necessarily the best fit always. And then we mentioned it a little bit a few moments ago, but by bringing the pre-tax benefit offerings in-house, you as an employer can actually realize the advantage of those tax savings, while still providing the key benefits that are important to the employees. So now we've kind of gone through a few things, right? So now perhaps you're thinking, okay, so this is reasonable, this makes sense, but where do I begin in identifying an ASO model compared to the PEO model? I think one of the key ones is getting that trusted advisor, identifying who that person is going to be. This should be really the number one on your list. Who is your trusted advisor? Well, your benefit broker or consultant that invited you to this webinar is a great example of a trusted advisor. When evaluating a trusted advisor, I believe that it's key to evaluate the culture and the value of your own company, and then make sure that it's aligning with your trusted advisor or benefit broker, right? So what are their differentiators? Where are they focused when they're putting together your strategies? Do they understand not just the benefit strategy that is needed to be addressed, but also the overall business strategy that is needed? Do they have valued partners that they work with to address and meet all the needs of the businesses? Are they credible and compliant? I mean, those two words alone are big when you're looking for and evaluating the needs of a business and developing that ASO model. You know, obviously the professionals, like I mentioned, at Johnson & Dugan, AEIS, and KBI, they understand the value and the needs analysis when developing an ASO model, so moving away from that PEO. All right, just want to check a question real quick, but it looks like we can get to that one. So once you have your trusted advisor, the very next step is to review that client services agreement, or the CSA. And this is the contract that you signed when you moved into that PEO model. So you have your trusted advisor. The next step is let's sit down and let's review that CSA, because this piece is going to be the key in identifying what your obligations are under the PEO, the contract length, the necessary notice that you might have to provide to leave the PEO, and many more key items to determine the best strategy that aligns with your business strategy. This next slide is it's a very short, just a couple of ideas, right, on a checklist. But really, it's working with that strategic advisor, working with that person is going to be the key to reviewing that client services agreement. And we've developed here at PrimePay, for our key benefits brokers and consultants, a more comprehensive checklist. So we have a great tool that'll go in and it'll help evaluate the needs and the determination of moving from that PEO. But let's look at some things just to consider up front while we're going through this. Kind of mentioned it a few moments ago, right? Is there a minimum contract length? Is it month to month? Is it 1 year? Is it 2 years? So just making sure that you're identifying that piece of it, right? Is there a requirement to leave? So do you need to give a certain amount of time, right, to leave? Is it a 90-day notice, a 30-day notice? So checking into those different types of things. Reviewing the benefit offering. What are the benefits that are being offered at this time? What other services need to be replaced, right? Do you have payroll? Most likely needs to be replaced. Time and attendance, workers' comp, 401k. Another key item to think about is the COBRA costs. Making sure that you're reading your contract and understanding what your responsibilities as an employer when moving away from that PEO. And it's not something that's complicated. It's not a complex process to change a COBRA administrator. But if it's not done properly when you're leaving a PEO, you could realize some extra costs. So again, having that trusted advisor and making sure that you're going through the required steps is going to be key. And then again, you know, HR administration. So like I mentioned, this is just a great beginning checklist, but let's break it down now into a few buckets that you should be thinking about. So let's start first and foremost, let's start with payroll. Payroll is, quite frankly, a huge draw in working with a PEO. So bringing that in-house and understanding what needs are required. There are, of course, the basics to payroll, right? Like, well, how about getting paid? That's a key one probably, right? But what about the year-end forms, the W-2 processing, federal, state, local taxes, all the reporting information, annual and quarterly tax deposits, You may have applicant tracking, onboarding, or time and attendance needs. So again, what is the comfort level of the person that will now be responsible for the payroll portion? Is there different options that are available to help that employee? Discovering those. Is applicant tracking and onboarding due to the company growing and streamlining that process important? So asking those different questions, thinking internally, what am I going to need? What about time and attendance? Is there different divisions with different needs, or perhaps variable hours? So just thinking through all of those pieces, right? And maybe you didn't have it through the PEO and it was something that was lacking, but it's something that as you're going through your new strategy that you're able to think about those things. And again, your trusted advisor is going to be there to help you, guide you. And they're going to do that by helping to guide you, but also by using their key partnerships as well. The next one, which, nobody likes this word, I don't think at all, and that's, compliance. So what are your compliance needs? What are you going to need to do now as an employer, no longer in that co-employment situation? How are you going to get those needs met? You'll have needs, right, in regards to HR services and staying in compliance. So, how are you going to get those needs met? Setting up the necessary plan documents for ERISA, setting up the necessary compliance pieces in regards to COBRA, determining your needs through ACA, the Affordable Care Act. Are you an ALE, right? And here I am now with a whole bunch of acronyms at you, but are you an applicable large employer through the Affordable Care Act? What are your responsibilities going to be and your reporting needs if that is actually, part of what's going to happen for you? How about your pre-tax benefits? Getting those accounts set up correctly and in compliance. And then with that, you may now have some non-discrimination testing needs. So bringing all of those things together, again, through your trusted advisor will be key, but it's just something that you need to recognize and realize as part of, being the employer, that these are necessary requirements. So this is an interesting slide, and I popped this one in here just to give an idea, and I probably don't even have to tell you as an employer, how much of the benefit spend is part of, your overall spend. But according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and this was released in December of 2017, insurance benefits costs on average $5.80 per employee per hour, or 11.9% of total compensation. And I mentioned that $5.80. So of the employee's total compensation, $5.80 goes towards benefits. But the health piece of it alone represents $5.65. So I bring that to your attention, not because any of the other components are less important, but when you're working with that strategic advisor, right, putting together that plan design for the health and the other benefits does definitely become a key decision, which of course brings us right to the next one. So we've talked about payroll, we've talked about compliance. How about employee benefits? A key part of the strategy is definitely going to be the employee benefits, especially with what we just talked about, right? That nearly 12% of an employee's total compensation is benefits, and the majority of that 12% comes from the medical plan alone. But there are other plans that you're going to want to consider, and based on the current offering or the needs of the specific demographics within your company, they could be, the life insurance piece, pre-tax benefits, voluntary, disability, dental. I'm sure that I'm missing who knows how many more, and that's where, Mike, Chris, or Alyssa can really get in there and bring those to life. But those are a few, I think, big ones that I can think of right off the top of my head. They may even, wellness may be something that's important as well. So now that you've looked at those three pieces, right? So we've looked at compliance, we've looked at payroll, we've thought about the employee benefit package. What are your technology needs as an employer? Do you need an online enrollment platform? What are the exact needs and the functions that needs to be talking together, right? Is it important for payroll to feed the benefit administration platform in real time so employees can elect their benefits? And then once the employees actually elect those benefits, is it now important for that to feed back to payroll so it sets up the payroll deductions? So again, just key things that you need to be thinking about when you are bringing it all together, when you're bringing in the payroll, the compliance, the benefit pieces. Is there a technology need that needs to go along with that portion of it? So bringing all the pieces together, right, through a connected solution with your advisor first. So getting that advisor set up, getting the plan design, getting their support that they bring in, a valuable amount of support. There's even the open enrollment piece of it, bringing in their partner relationships, whether it's payroll, it's pre-tax benefits, it's HR and compliance, it's the group health piece. But bringing all of those pieces together into one connected solution that hopefully, right, that one business solution will be designed specifically to meet your needs as the employer. And Michael, how do we look on time for a few questions? Or Mike?
Yeah, no, we're looking good. We are hoping to keep this to about 30 minutes and then some questions so people can get on with their day. But yeah, looks like there's a few questions that have come through. Are you seeing those, Joanne?
I am. Let me see if I can pull them up so I can see them easier. Because right now I'm trying to scroll through questions. Let's see. Okay, so one of the questions, it looks, can you see them better than me?
Yeah. So where can you find out if a PEO is certified? How can you find out if your PEO is certified?
So that's a great question. The certification program is part of the Internal Revenue Service. So they're the one that have put together the certification for these PEOs. And if really, it's kind of easy. You can just Google who is a certified PEO, and it will bring up the link to the IRS piece of it. I'd be happy to share that download as well when we send out the recording for the employers. But it's actually public knowledge, so it's easy to find.
Okay, good. The next one is, how much lead time should be given to the process if you're looking at, maybe the process, I think what they mean of evaluating whether you should leave your PEO, and then I think on top of that, then how much time should be given to handle that separation?
Yep, so that's a very important part of it, and I've seen it all over the map. I've seen where we've taken over from a PEO within 30 to 60 days. I've also seen the process last about 6 months when you first start reviewing that CSA, right? What are my needs? What do I need to do? I think once you make that decision, you're looking at about a 60 to 90-day move over. So building everything out, getting the information communicated correctly, you probably want to do it about 60 days. So I would say anywhere from about 6 months to making sure that you've made that decision and you give yourself 60 days to move forward with it.
All right, great. Next question is this something we can do at any time of the year or just at the benefits renewal?
No, so you can do it any time of the year. We just have to watch that CSA to see if there's anything in there that's unusual, but this does not have to be on the contract date of the PEO. It doesn't have to be on renewal for the benefits. They can be done off cycle all day long.
Okay, but I do believe, is it also correct that there's possibly some payroll tax implications that they should be checking with their accountants on by leaving possibly early in the middle of the year?
Yeah, so on the payroll piece of it, you definitely want to look at more moving during a quarter. So at the end of a quarter, so either you do it January 1st or April 1st. So you're looking at the different quarters. And the reason is because a lot of the payroll taxes are paid quarterly. And this makes it cleaner and easier. So you know what your back taxes were for that quarter, and now you're moving fresh for the new quarter. So definitely moving on a quarter makes it easier on payroll. And then the only piece that you do have to be concerned about on the employee side of it is if you do have some highly comped individuals, if it's going to affect their Social Security piece of it. So have they already maxed out their Social Security? Will they have a reset? So that's one of the other ones that we always ask to see where the employee is, if they do have any highly comped employees, because that will affect those individuals.
Okay, great. Another question here. What happens with FSA plans when leaving a PEO?
Yeah, so this one is a tricky one. Because the PEO is now the employer of record, when you leave a PEO and you have an FSA, the employee needs to spend down all their money. So that's another reason why when you're thinking about lead time and you're thinking about the communication piece of it, if an employee still has money in their FSA, when that contract terminates with the PEO, it's gone, it's lost. There's no rollover, there's no carryover. None of that happens. So the communication piece with an FSA is key to make sure that the employee knows, okay, you have, $300 in your account. We have 60 days to spend that down. That's what happens when you leave a PEO on the FSA side.
Okay. All right. Great. One last thing too, I think I'll comment on with regards to the timing and for the analysis and all that. I would let your consultant have a good 2 minimum to 4 weeks to really wrap their head around all the alternatives and solutions you have in front of you. And with that, the more lead time and the quicker ahead of schedule you can get with regards to time to implement, the better. So to work with your consultant to keep this from being a fire drill at the end of the year is always a good thing. Maybe 6 months ahead of time, start looking at the opportunity cost of possibly leaving your PEO, so there's plenty of time to plan and have a smooth transition. So with that, I think looks like I don't have any more questions here from anybody else. If there's any final questions anybody would like to put through, please do so now, and we'll give it a second here. But outside of that, I think we're pretty well wrapped up. Anything else you'd like to add, Joanne?
No, just thank you very much for your time today. And if anything does come up, feel free to reach out to either Mike, Chris, or Alyssa, and they definitely know how to get in contact with me. So we appreciate everybody's time this morning.
Very good. Well, I don't see any other questions coming through, so I think we'll wrap it up and let people get on with their day. Thanks a lot, Joanne. We appreciate your help.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye.